What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. We have a lot more Spider-Man updates today, specifically about the release date for Spider-Man 4 and the new deals and negotiations that are happening right now between Sony and Marvel. If you didn't catch our video yesterday, you should know that it looks like Sony might kind of be putting an end to their Spider-Man universe. This has not yet been confirmed, but with what we are hearing about the deals that are right now being negotiated between Sony and Marvel Studios, it looks like that is a possibility. But there is one pretty big change that we are hearing about, and it involves a lot of Marvel characters that Sony owns the rights to currently. However, it looks like this new deal is going to be extremely beneficial for the MCU and Marvel Studios and for the fans as well. Now, of course, both of the studios are just that. They're studios, they're huge companies. And of course, they want to make money, but a part of me really does want to believe that when Sony and Marvel get together, they do also talk about what the fans want. It's probably more Kevin Feige talking about that more than anybody, but if what we've been hearing about this new deal is true, then it works out for literally everybody. Sony can make more money, Marvel Studios can use more characters in the MCU, which will in turn excite the fans and make them happy. So let's dive into what this new deal is apparently going to be. It starts with a rumor from the account The Geeky Cast, who is a new scooper, so take this with a grain of salt, but we do know that negotiations are happening right now between Sony and Marvel, and some other insider reports apparently back up this rumor, which is why we're talking about it. But the rumor is, put very simplistically, Marvel Studios will eventually be able to use the villains that Sony uses in their SUMC, whatever you want to call it. They can use them in the Marvel Cinematic Universe eventually. Now, the old deal, from what we know, was pretty much if Sony used somebody in their universe, Marvel Studios couldn't touch it. We know that originally Kraven was wanted for Spider-Man No Way Home. He was supposed to be the sixth member of the Sinister Six. Instead, we got a Sinister Five, and it was revealed that Sony said, no, you can't use Kraven because we're using Kraven. Now, of course, we don't know all of the intricate details of whatever deal Marvel and Sony struck for Spider-Man to be in the MCU, but this is reportedly how the new deal is going to go down, at least a part of the new deal. According to the report, apparently Sony will now start notifying Marvel Studios about which Spider-Man related villains will be used in their non-MCU projects. Marvel will then be blocked from using that character until at least 30 days after the Sony movie is released on VOD, video on demand. So this is actually good, even though it kind of sounds bad because it says they're blocked from using a character until 30 days after it releases on video on demand, but this is actually a very good thing. This means that even if Sony uses some characters, uses villains in their universe, that means Marvel Studios can still use them. They are not completely blocked from using them altogether, they just have to wait a little bit, which I guess is relatively fair. If Sony puts out a movie with a certain character, they don't want that movie to be overshadowed by a big MCU project that is going to be using the same character. The MCU definitely overshadows Sony and their Spider-Man adjacent universe, so I can understand that. But at the same time, at least Sony is playing ball and they're allowing Marvel to eventually use the characters, and this seems to be what is happening with Venom and Null. Alex Perez from thecosmiccircus.com, a very credible insider, has reported that Sony and Marvel Studios have worked together, and apparently in Spider-Man 4 we are going to get Venom and Null in the MCU. And based off of the release dates for everything, this all seems to line up with this new reported deal. But to talk about that, we do have to talk about a new report from Alex Perez at thecosmiccircus.com that states the Spider-Man release date has moved. According to his report, it's been delayed, but don't worry, it hasn't been delayed by that much. He stated on Twitter, originally, the set date for Spider-Man 4 is delayed. As of this moment, the film has been moved to July of 2026. Now, there's actually two ways to view this release date change. One is that it's only been delayed a month. According to insider Daniel Richman, Marvel Studios is planning on releasing Spider-Man 4 in June or July of 2026. And now, according to Alex Perez, it is indeed moved to July 2026, but originally Sony had on their release date slate an untitled movie that was a Sony/Marvel live action film. That's what they listed it as, and that was supposed to be June of 2025. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen, but if that was the original release date planned for Spider-Man 4, then that means the movie has been delayed a year. However, since a lot of insiders have already stated we should probably expect it in June of 2026, July 2026 really isn't that big of a deal. And although it's possible the movie gets changed again or gets delayed a little bit, it's probably not going to happen because they have a while, but they are still negotiating everything, and we know from past experiences that Sony and Marvel don't always see eye to eye. I mean, a few years ago, we almost lost Spider-Man from the MCU. Now, everything is good though, but it seems like they're just kind of finalizing the details of this new deal. What we've heard recently is that Spider-Man, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, is going to actually get 2 more movies in the MCU, and his character specifically is going to be a lot bigger than he originally was going to via the old Sony Marvel deal. And it sounds like, at least post Avengers Secret Wars, we could finally be getting the Spider-Man stories that we deserve. I'm not saying that everything that has happened already was bad, because it definitely wasn't, but now, according to the rumored new deal of Sony and Marvel with the villains, Marvel will eventually be able to use essentially whoever they want. If this new report is true, that means villains are open to Marvel Studios now. They can use Spider-Man villains, including Kraven. Yes, Kraven is getting his own movie, but if this new deal is true, then after the movie releases on video on demand and streaming, 30 days after, Marvel could drop him in a movie, which means they can begin filming a Spider-Man film with these villains in it and just plan the release date for this movie 30 days after the release date on streaming. And it looks like that's what's going to happen for Venom and Null. Venom and Null are obviously the 2 main characters of Venom 3, The Last Dance. And that movie comes out next month in October. So a few months after it gets out of theaters, or maybe even less than that, it'll be on VOD and streaming. And then 30 days after that, Marvel can use it. Well, Spider-Man 4 is not coming out now until July of 2026, so they have plenty of time. So Spider-Man 4 is the perfect example of this new deal. Even if Sony uses a villain, for example, Null, they can still use that villain in the MCU. But here's the big question. Does Marvel have to act like it's the same character from the Sony Spider-Verse? Because in the case of Venom: The Last Dance and Spider-Man 4, it does seem like the Venom and Null that are going to be in Spider-Man 4 are the exact same characters that are going to be coming from the Sony Spider-Verse. So would that mean if Marvel Studios decided to use Kraven, would it have to be the Kraven from the Sony universe, or could they do their own take on it? That's kind of the only question we have right now, because otherwise it's simply a win for Marvel Studios. Everything that we've been hearing about the new negotiations for Spider-Man and Spider-Man characters in the MCU have all been pretty good, depending on how you view Spider-Man 4 being a multiverse film, because it kind of looks like Sony gets their way on that one. If they would have stuck to that original release date of June 2025, then yeah, it could have been a street-level grounded film, but now coming out in July of 2026, that's right between Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars. There's really not too many ways that I could think of that it could be a pretty grounded story, especially if it's happening during the middle of the multiverse collapsing. But there is a thought on top of this news where Marvel Studios can essentially use who they want. The thought that Sony is actually getting rid of their own Sony Spider-Man universe, and that by essentially giving Marvel permission to use any of the characters that they want in Spider-Man's arsenal, Sony is kind of abandoning what they had set out to start, this Spider-Man universe that doesn't have Spider-Man in it. Perhaps they have realized that that simply doesn't work. These characters are only interesting because of Spider-Man. It's not that people don't care about the characters, but the connection to Spider-Man is really what makes these characters very interesting, unless they're insanely huge characters like Kingpin. But Sony could definitely license these characters to Marvel Studios, them make money off of it, and Marvel make money off of it, and they'll probably make more money than they would if they did solo films on these characters. Just look at Morbius, just look at Madam Web. Maybe Sony realized that, who knows? We did a full video on that yesterday, you can check it out, but be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of the latest news in regards to the new Sony Marvel deal, and of course, Spider-Man 4. And please don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it, and leave your thoughts about all of this news in the comments down below. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and as always, thank you all so much for watching. Woof woof.